let's be clear. The Republicans run the House. The Republicans run the Senate. The Republicans run the White House. The Republicans run the Supreme Court, as far as I'm concerned. This was a choice by Republicans to cut SNAP benefits. This was a choice by Republicans to cut ACA subsidies. This was a choice by the Republicans to gut the federal government and federal employment. Democrats had nothing to do with it. I want an opposition party. I think the Democrats caved. I think the Democrats let down the American people. The American people saying we do want the opposition. The working people want the Democratic Party to fight for them. And now they just caved and surrendered. I think Chuck Schumer, his days are over. If he cannot keep his caucus together, he needs to go. He needs to be replaced.
I just want to bring you some news just in. The Senate has voted to approve a funding measure to reopen the federal government and end the longest shutdown in US history. Now, the bill must now go to the House for approval before it is then sent to President Donald Trump's desk to be signed. But just repeating this news just in, that the Senate has voted to approve a funding measure to reopen the federal government and end the longest shutdown in US history.
Well, the BBC has finally reached a moment of reckoning, I think. Last night I showed you how BBC staff doctored a clip from President Donald Trump's speech to make it look like he had incited a riot at the Capitol building. Now, in case you've not seen it, have a look at what they did.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Unbelievable. But there was more. There was evidence of bias against Israel in the Gaza conflict and evidence of bias in the trans debate, where the BBC deliberately pushed a pro-trans agenda. Well, today, BBC Director General Tim Davie has resigned, and so too has BBC CEO of News, Deborah Tenness, who less than an hour ago had this to say.
I stepped down over the weekend because the buck stops with me. But I'd like to make one thing very clear. BBC News is not institutionally biased.
Spiked Online editor Tom Slater joins me with more details live from London. Tom, let me start with the News CEO there, who just an hour ago said, I'm quitting because the buck stops with me, but there is no instance of institutional bias at the BBC. Is that just another lie from the BBC?
It's an unwitting one, but I guess that's the problem with the BBC, isn't it? You've just been forced out, effectively handed in your resignation after tremendous criticism for systemic bias, and then you say that we're not biased. I mean, it beggars belief. It's really worth stressing this, and you were gesturing it to it there, James, in your introduction, is that the allegations about what they did to that Trump speech, which is an outrageous piece of misinformation. They took those two sections, which were about an hour apart, and stitched them together to make it look like he had incited the mob on January 6th. It's an unforgivable overstep. Bias doesn't cut it in that instance. But that memo, which was published by The Telegraph, which is what has precipitated all of this, is chock full of even more shocking examples. The BBC Arabic website constantly, hundreds of times, using contributors to talk about Israel and Palestine, who have openly said things, we should burn the Jews like Hitler did. You've got allegations in there that their internal LGBTQ plus question mark, whatever the acronym is now, team were actively censoring stories about the gender issue. And then there's another one, which is BBC Verify, which is their vaunted anti-misinformation team. The first big investigation they did was into a story about supposedly racist car insurance refusals, which turned out to be complete nonsense. Their misinformation team pumping out misinformation. We've talked for a long time about BBC bias. It's far deeper than that. Heads are rolling now, but will it spark a reckoning? That remains to be seen, as you suggest.
So let me ask you this. Imagine, we've got friends at GB News, for instance, in the UK. If GB News were pulling these kind of stunts, would they still be on air?
They'd have their knuckles rapped by Ofcom. They'd probably be severely sanctioned. If you've got people who are actively misrepresenting what politicians are saying to fit a prescribed narrative,
yeah,
it doesn't matter what organisation you are, there's going to be consequences for that. And there's been a lot of discussion in recent days, excuse me, kind of contrasting the BBC with GB News and BBC defenders, saying it's more important than ever that we defend this wonderful institution. The thing about GB News is GB News knows that it is GB News. The BBC has no idea that it is the left-wing GB News. That is the problem. That is the issue. When Deborah Turness says there is no bias at the BBC, I kind of believe that she believes that. I think it is sincere. The problem is that this kind of bias, this kind of manipulation, this kind of political agenda is the water that these people swim in, which means that I think when it comes to having a clear out of the BBC, it's almost certainly going to go beyond just two people at the top. There's a much deeper problem here.
Yeah, by the way, I wasn't insinuating anything against GB News with that question. I'm interested in the parallel in terms of, how the two organisations might be treated. Donald Trump didn't waste any time. He went on Trump Social and said, there you go, I've called it fake news and now it's proved. Not only that, but I guess for the national broadcaster, Tom, to be essentially defaming the President of the United States, the UK's most important ally, the BBC are meant to act in the interests of the people of Britain. This would be blatantly acting against the national interest for their own ideological purposes. I don't know how else to put it.
No, I think that's very well put. And I think what's also been so striking about the reaction in recent days is that there has been an attempt to present the exit of Tim Davie and Deborah Turness as effectively the corporation bowing to right-wing pressure. That's both from the White House, but there's also kind of all kinds of conspiracy theories doing the rounds about various members of the BBC board who are Tories by background, and therefore they've engineered this. I mean, if there is a kind of right-wing coup at the BBC, it's been the most ineffectual one in history. And every time that the BBC is attacked, even quite rightly, as the White House are well within their rights to have done in this instance, the move is always to be incredibly defensive. It's almost like we have to ignore these criticisms because otherwise we can't defend the institution. If people within the BBC or outside of it really want it to continue to exist, to continue to maintain its reputation both here and around the world, which has taken a hell of a knock over the course of the past week, they need to take these questions seriously. What we've seen since then is just deflection, as I say, conspiracy theories, and a refusal to accept that anything has gone wrong, even when a dossier enumerating dozens of times in which it has gone wrong has been presented to them. If they can't learn from this, I don't think there is any scandal that could shake them out of this.